with Scott Allen.
Hello, I am your host, Scott Allen, and this is Phronesis, Practical Wisdom for Leaders. If the topic is leadership, I'm in. I've spent more than 20 years in the field teaching, learning, writing, and questioning. When I'm not working on Phronesis, I travel, delivering keynotes, working with individuals and teams, and helping people from organizations across industries become better leaders. Want to learn more? Visit me at scottjallen.net. Phronesis offers a smart, fast-paced discussion about all things leadership. We explore relevant topics and incorporate practical tips to help you make a difference in how you lead and live. Listen Notes lists Phronesis in the top 3% of podcasts worldwide. Phronesis is the official podcast of the International Leadership Association. ILA brings together those who teach, study, and develop leadership, advancing leadership knowledge and practice for a better world. Learn more at ila-net.org. Finally, if you enjoy Phronesis, please subscribe to stay current on our weekly episodes. If you find an episode that resonates, please share it with your colleagues and friends. And if you want more content, subscribe to my newsletter, The Leader's Edge. The link is in the show notes. As always, thanks for listening. And now, here's today's show. Okay, everybody, welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Thanks for being with us. Thanks for checking in to Phronesis. And today I have a longtime friend, and I'm excited for this conversation. I have Ethan Braden, and he is the Executive Vice President and Chief Marketing and Communication Officer at Purdue University and Purdue Global. Ranked as one of the top 10 most innovative schools in America by U.S. News and World Report for 4 consecutive years, Ethan leads the system in the persistent pursuit of the next giant leap by passionately positioning, promoting, and protecting the Purdue brand and portfolio worldwide. In October 2021, Fast Company magazine selected Purdue University as one of its inaugural Brands That Matter, a list honoring companies and organizations that authentically communicate their mission and ideals and give people compelling reasons to care about them, according to Fast Company editors. The only university and the only Indiana entity named a brand that matters, Purdue was selected alongside Nike, 3M, McDonald's, Ford, Yeti, and other large multinational conglomerates, small companies, and nonprofits. In 2020, the American Marketing Association recognized Ethan as a Marketer of the Year and Purdue University's Central Marketing and Communications team as Team of the Year, both for higher education. He has appeared in Fast Company magazine, The Washington Post, Ad Age, The Hechinger Report, and The Morning Brew. Ethan has spoken at Google Marketing Live and Salesforce's Dreamforce, as well as appeared on numerous podcasts related to brand management, marketing, and higher education. Ethan teaches personal branding to student athletes at Purdue University's Optimizing Personal Brand and Image class, an innovative partnership between Purdue's School of Management and Purdue Athletics prompted by NIL. Previous to Purdue, Ethan worked for Eli Lilly and Company for a decade, where he served in a variety of senior marketing and sales leadership roles in the United States and globally, building, launching, and managing some of Lilly's and the pharmaceutical industry's most successful and life-changing billion-dollar brands. Ethan earned his MBA from the University of Notre Dame and his bachelor degree from Willamette University in Salem, Oregon. Ethan lives in West Lafayette, Indiana, with his wife, Betsy, their son, Benjamin, and their daughter, Margaret. Ethan, sir, what else do people need to know about you? What's not in that bio that we just said?
I'm not sure anything's missing. I'm just a big admirer of Professor Allen, and I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Well, Ethan, I'm so excited for this conversation. And really, when it kind of sparked me, I was like, wow, I need to get Ethan on the podcast, because and I said this to you in that call that we had a few weeks ago, kind of prepping this discussion, when I think of you, the words lifelong learning just really, it's like a billboard. I just so appreciate how you're consistently posting on LinkedIn, how you're consistently sharing with others what you're learning. And so when we talked about, okay, where do we take the conversation today? I mean, obviously we could go in the direction of marketing and some of your day job, but really I want to focus on this learning piece. You have an undergraduate degree, you have a graduate degree, but you are a voracious consumer. Maybe we start there. I want to eventually get to kind of what are some resources that you found really, really valuable. But let's talk about your passion for learning and how you think about learning.
Scotty, I think they're intertwined. The marketing piece of it is just what I've become, super interested in over time. But it's the study of people and psychology and behavior change and choice.
Yeah.
So for me, it's that combo of just curiosity and hopefully humility and a commitment to being a lifelong learner. There's a wonderful book out maybe the last 2 years. It's not lifelong learning, it's long life learning by Michelle Weiss at Strata. And she just makes some incredible points there of, the first person to live to 150 is likely born. And we could be talking about 80-year careers at this point. So what you learn at 22 versus what you need to know at 42, especially in marketing, but in any other space you want to talk about, versus what I'll need at 62 versus, what you might be doing at 82 along the way. And the average individual who has 5 to 7 careers, if you will, in a lifetime, the idea now is with the free agency, et cetera, it could be 20 to 30. And so on ramps and off ramps and making that frictionless to continue to upskill and reskill and learn and gain the knowledge you need to be successful has just been a really interesting and important space for me.
It has been. I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. A couple of years ago, I wrote an article called, On the Cutting Edge of the Chopping Block. I think for each one of us, and in academia at least, there's kind of this impression that as a professor, you are the person at the front of the room who's professing. And I started this class at my institution a few years ago now, where it's all about technologies enabling disruption. And really, in this instance, I'm kind of facilitating the learning. I'm learning alongside the students. I'm just ensuring that we get to Goodyear to learn about how they're thinking about innovation.
Yeah.
Or that we get to the Cleveland Clinic so that we can learn from them how they're thinking about innovation, or Sherwin-Williams or Progressive, because a lot of that expertise is in those individuals and in those organizations, and I can help facilitate that learning. But even as I look at higher ed, and as you look at the landscape of higher ed, both of that space that we are both in, it's shifting. I mean, metaversities. I have a podcast coming up with a gentleman who is starting all of these metaversities, or what's happening at Purdue University Global. I mean, you better be eyes wide open because it's shifting quickly.
It's unbelievable. I like Vala Afshar at Salesforce. I think they call him like the chief learning evangelist, if I'm not mistaken. But, he talks a ton about the number of roles that didn't exist 10 years ago and the number of roles that, people will be doing 10 years from now that haven't been invented today. So, what was a social media manager 10 years ago or 15 years ago? What was a UX designer 10 or 15 years ago? What was a TikTok star? What the hell was TikTok 10 years ago, et cetera? And so, no, I think that keen interest in having the curiosity of being humble enough to know that you don't know it all and staying not just intense, but consistent in the space is so key. And as I think about my staff, we can talk marketing all day long, but if there's one thing I can inspire them and continue to coach and lead them to do is just keep learning and make us better through their individual contributions, through their team contributions in spaces where, they're going to be far better than I am today. Their proficiency, whether it's in Google Analytics or it's in TikTok or whatever whatever you want to look at, social listening, et cetera. I don't know it. They know it. And collectively we're contributing to the realization of the mission of our group. So it's so key, Scotty, but so much fun too, right? Like, yeah, you could sit there and crush Better Call Saul or whatever it is you want on television. But, James Clear and Tim Ferriss and, people of that sort, I just love consuming their stuff and sharing their stuff.
Well, let's talk a little bit about something you just said, because I do want to touch, we're going to take a little bit of a detour right now. I do want to touch a little bit on leadership. And I think you said something just really, really profound there. You have this humble curiosity that, look, I don't know it all. I can't know it all. Things are shifting so quickly. I have to remain humble. I have to remain curious. Probably one of the best things I can do for my team, for the people that I'm leading, is encouraging their learning, encouraging that they are in that same mindset. Talk a little bit more about that. How does that show up on a day-to-day basis? Because I think it's brilliant.
I mean, I'm not blowing smoke when I say I think I learned it from you and others at Beta Theta Pi back in the day, which was an early and avid and genuine commitment to professional and personal development. So
Yeah.
we were reading Good to Great when I was 22, right?
Yeah.
We were talking about Built to Last and the Nordstrom Way and Be Our Guest from Disney and Ritz Carlton, et cetera, at that point in time, trying to consume at that point great customer service, customer experience learnings. There was a commitment to helping folks take that next step in their life. So for us, whether it was MBAs or law degrees, et cetera, we were helping folks prepare for those next steps in their educational journey. And I've tried to not only bring that to Purdue, but I lived that at Lilly as well. I mean, the professional development at Eli Lilly and Company, the training ground in marketing and in insights and in management that was there at Lilly was P&G-esque. I mean, it just taught me so much. And so I've tried to bring that to Purdue, and we're just avid about making experiences and learnings, and now podcasts and tweets and anything else that can be shared for our people, believing that the compound interest of what they bring, the compound interest of what they contribute is what's making us so successful. So moreover, I think it's an incredible retention tactic. I think,
Yeah.
what is it? Daniel Pink talks around purpose, mastery, and autonomy being three of the contributors to really fulfilling work. And part of that is making sure people feel really equipped and empowered to do their jobs really, really well.
Yeah.
And staying fresh on that is key.
So talk a little bit more, Ethan, about how that's actually operationalized in the day-to-day at Purdue. Do we have, I always talk about how the reason I'm doing what I'm doing was that Bob Cottrell took us through the leadership challenge, and we
Yeah,
read that book as
exactly.
a team Thursday mornings. I think it was 7 a.m. And we talked about it. And that really sparked my passion for leadership. And you're right, whether it was books by Wooden or Nordstrom or Ritz Carlton, yeah, we were consuming voraciously a lot of that content to help us develop and grow. How does it operationalize in your leadership right now, in your team? Are we reading books together? Is it just that there's a budget for people to tap in? Is it just you're promoting it? Is it all of those? How does it play out?
Yeah, it's all of those. I mean, I think to a couple things early on, and we had the same thing on our staff, if you remember, Scotty, but I remember taking a large amount of our employees, 20 plus, to the American Marketing Association in 2019. And when we walked through, we were a novelty because there were so many of us at that time, but I wanted our staff to have that experience, and I wanted our
Nice.
staff to have that experience together.
Yes.
And then COVID hit, right? And so professional development budgets really went to basically zero, or there was really no way to spend them other than on the things that you could consume at home. So it was online opportunities, et cetera. But for the lion's share for me was buying books. So there's a lot of organic learning. And I think it's Chip Kelly, if I remember correctly, at Lululemon, who talked about really sort of indoctrinating his staff with his leadership team on 4 or 5 key books that over time, 2 or 3 thousand of their employees read together.
Mm,
And we've tried to do that same thing on our staff. So whether it's The Flywheel by Jim Collins, whether it's Good to Great in the Social Sectors by Jim Collins, whether it's Phil Duesenberry's book, One Great Insight is Worth 1,000 Great Ideas, we have sort of hand selected books in the marketing discipline, David Auker's 20 Rules on Branding, Creating Signature Stories by David Auker as well. We've tried to go out and find texts that when we read together and we consume together, it creates common knowledge and it creates common language, which is something I learned at Lilly. When we say an insight, at Lilly, that there was a certain definition for that word. There was a common language that pervaded, that community of employees as a result of referring to the same texts. So
yeah.
we do a fair amount in that space as well. And then I think it's just a healthy sort of give and take, curious learning environment of, hey, I read this and thought of you today. I listened to this podcast. I got one today sent to me by somebody else. It's
Yeah.
just that sharing of sort of those common fishing holes for incredible learnings, credible quotations, credible analogies that we try to share actively, and sharpen iron on iron here. When we talk about positioning, or we talk about an insight, or you talk about a big idea, or you talk about a creative brief, you could get 20 different definitions. And
Yeah.
and at Lilly, for the most part, they said, well, this is the one we adopt. This is the one we utilize for these reasons.
Yep.
And we've tried to do the same thing at Purdue, is have a common understanding and a common language, which also is a shortcut of efficiency. When I say insight, I don't have to say another 200 words on that topic. You know what I mean by that.
Well, and that creates a synergy, and like you said, it creates shared understanding about what it is we're trying to accomplish, where we're going, and it's working. I mean, Ethan, I have not yet told you this. I'm telling you this live in our conversation right now. I was in Denali 2 weeks ago, and not in Denali. I was at the national park.
Yep.
I was, I got to clarify where I was, but we're staying in this lodge. And there's this young woman at the lodge. She's wearing a Purdue t-shirt. She's there with her family. She just graduated. And I said, Purdue? I said, my good friend works at Purdue. And I said, you know what? They've been doing some just incredible things. And she said, oh, our social media is incredible. It's just amazing. And I thought of you. I'm thinking, wow, I am in Alaska. Here's someone with a Purdue t-shirt on. I mentioned you and that you're in marketing, and she identifies very, very quickly with this pride around that social media. It's awesome. I mean, it has to feel wonderful what you all, with that common understanding, that common language, what you're building and the momentum that's being gained, right?
Yeah, exactly. No, we're having a blast. I think it was David Novak, if I'm correct. One of them said everybody's got a mission statement, but uniquely, only some places have people on a mission.
Yeah.
And we've just built a culture of people in their individual functions, on their teams, et cetera, that are on certain missions. And our social media team has just been on fire for the last 2.5 years. I'll give you one example that I love. So when we all went home in March of 2020, it was quickly realized that instead of campus visits, instead of having people, experience the campus, et cetera, we're all on our couch now. And from March of 2020 to August of 2020, so many universities were just throwing things against the wall to see what sticks as they were trying to essentially close that final freshman class for that or for that August, right?
Yep.
So we really stuck to our brand and we stuck to the platform that we had just launched 6 weeks before that, our brand platform. But probably the most important thing we did was we really rethought our YouTube strategy, and we really rethought and unearthed all the greatest video we had. We rebranded it and we put it back out thematically in addition to anything we were creating. And the reason I tell you that is during that period, we upped engagement by 150% versus the previous period. But more importantly, we had more views on our content than 5 benchmarked peers during that period combined, which we
Wow.
then replicated again in 21, and we just replicated again in the first half of 22. And I say that to say that, it used to be a 9 to 5 job for some in social media. Now it's darn near 24 hours.
Yeah.
And a lot of companies, I saw this put out the other day that said, a lot of companies have forgotten the social and social media. And that's the truth. We're moving really from the quantity metrics of views and impressions these days to the quality metrics of engagement.
Yeah.
It's one thing if you click on my video on YouTube, I want you to spend time with it. I want you to complete it. I want you to take action based on it. So all of that is key to us. But I'll say one other thing on this point, and that is, at Notre Dame, which I loved, and I'm devout in the respect of having gone to school there for graduate school, you see lots of people with sweatshirts on that don't have a whole lot of tie to it other than their affinity. You see somebody with a Purdue sweatshirt on, they probably went there or had somebody go there. So it's a little smaller, but boy, it's tight knit. And they just have a great affinity for the experience they had and what Purdue stands for.
Well, and I just love the connection back to Neil Armstrong and the next giant leap. I mean, I think that's just a beautiful platform from which to look forward, right? And it's something that's so easily understood and valued, and I can get behind it very, very quickly because there's just a strong visual image associated with that. And I love the mindset of, okay, things have shifted, but what can we do to capitalize and benefit from this challenging situation that we're in? But how can we make the best of it? And there's a mindset there. There's just absolutely a mindset, right?
There is. We've studied it deeply. And I often say, the student at Purdue is not the student at Pomona. So there is a segmentation. There is a psychographic segmentation, I think, for these schools. But yeah, so you note Neil and 26 astronauts from Purdue that have since flown in space since then. 1/3 of all U.S. space flights have had a Purdue grad on them.
Wow.
And we have the most astronauts of any non-military academy in the United States. And so we have a lineage and we have a history of putting people into space, and that's very ownable.
Yeah.
And so you want to own that, and you want to own what that's about.
Yeah.
Right. And so we talk about not only the giant leaps, but we also talk about the small steps that help get students there. We heard some of that when we rolled that campaign out the first time. Somebody said, hey, for some it's great, but others it might actually be alienating.
Yeah.
Because for me, I don't know that I'm capable of a giant leap. I'm more about the small step, or my giant leap was just getting into Purdue. And so we've made sure that there's a spectrum there for people to find a place under a very large umbrella
Yeah.
of the small steps and the giant leaps that are possible when you are persistent, when you are innovative, and when you are collaborative. So we wanted to do something very ownable and tell the world what we stand for in a way that's unique and compelling.
Well, it's working. I
I
it was proved.
appreciate that.
It was proven when I was in when I was in Denali. That was just so much fun to have that experience. So let's talk about you. Let's talk about your learning. How is it that obviously you're in a very senior level role at a very large institution? It's an executive position, very, very busy, family, there's a lot going on. Yet there's this intense commitment to learning. How have you systematized your learning? Take listeners through what it is you do, how you consume, and given that schedule, given everything you have going on, what's your tactic? Take us through a day or two of your learning in your cycle.
There's a few things I think I can share, and some of them are tactics, some of them are actually products. One thing that comes to mind right off the bat is I start my days with Readwise, the app. And the
Okay.
reason I love that is I get 8 quick reminders of things I've highlighted, whether those were PDFs, books, articles, whatever it may be. It serves up to me 8 reminders of those. And oftentimes I'm screenshotting and sharing them with a teammate, or I'm going back in and seeing the original article and reposting it to LinkedIn because it's something I want to share or something that's timely, et cetera. So Readwise is one of my favorite resources to catalog those quotations largely, those highlights largely, that if I was doing manually in a book or I was writing in a notebook, et cetera, would be pretty laborious. So I start the day usually with those.
Tell me a little bit more about Readwise. What is it? I've never heard of it as a resource.
It's just a beautiful app that is collating the highlights, the e-highlights that I have importing from texts, from PDFs, from any digital book in Kindle or your iBooks, et cetera. Anything that's digital where I've highlighted it, it's cataloging those and then randomly serving those back up to me, also allowing me to favorite them as well. I could share them, I could screenshot them, I could format them for social, whatever it may be.
Wow.
But I'll couple that with one other, and that's Pocket. So
Okay.
yes, I'm reading in Kindle. Yes, I'm reading my iBooks on the iPhone, etc. But Pocket has been my solution to, instead of previously emailing myself articles,
Yeah.
now all I have to do is say save in Pocket. It's sitting there waiting for me to read. I go back into it. I read it. I highlight what I want, and those highlights get served up into Readwise. So now I've got a catalog of everything I'm reading. I can
Uh-huh.
tag it all. So I can go in and say, I want things on persistence, or I want things on higher education, or I want things on family. And it's going to serve up to me those articles and those highlights across everything I've read in Pocket to see those. And then my nice reminder in Readwise is being able to see those served up to me each day as a reminder and something to share. So those are the two I love. I love Readwise and I love Pocket together as a learning and sort of cataloging efficiency.
Okay. So two awesome resources right there. What else?
I think the other part, we talked about this a little bit on the phone call, is just it's so easy and it's so frictionless, and there's just so many ways to consume now. And so having to have some frameworks or criteria to whittle that down some. And I've done that a lot through people. You think about who shapes your worldview. And it has to do, I think, with Twitter or bigger than that. And that being is, who do you follow? And so I'm avid about, I want to see, what Jim Collins has to say, or Tim Ferriss has to say, or Arthur Brooks has to say, or Naval Ravikant has to say, or Shane Parrish at the Knowledge Project. So I'm curating kind of who I'm learning from, what I'm reading, based often on the person or what
Okay.
their service is. So Tim Ferriss's 5 Bullet Fridays, James Clear's 321 on Thursdays, Shane Parrish's Knowledge Project on Sundays, Polina's Profile on Sundays. All of these are just serving me incredible info, but I could name you off 5 or 10 others, right? So I've had to do some of the culling just by who I respect, who I want to learn from, and who collectively is sort of shaping my learning and my worldview.
Okay. And then those resources, the James Clear or Tim Ferriss, then you sent me a book. I'm halfway through it now, by the way.
Yeah,
You sent me a book the other day. And so you might then be listening to Tim Ferriss, and then that might kind of turn you on to some other author or resource that then you choose to follow or not.
100%. I didn't mention podcasts, but Ferriss and Shane Parrish, his Knowledge Project. I mean, Rich Roll. I love their podcasts, and I guess there's 2 other points on that. At least one, and that is, at this point, I've decided that if I hear of a book I'm interested in, I buy it.
Mm,
I'm at that point in my life. I've got a professional development budget, and even if I didn't, the value of a $20 or $25 book is just amazing. So my wife is probably a little tired of them piling up in our bedroom and in our office, etc. But I've just and again, frictionless and easy. You hear of an incredible book like the one I sent you, Boyd Vardy's book here, that I just immediately go to Amazon and order it.
Yeah.
And it's, again, a system for me to accumulate the things that I want to read from the people I hear about or want to learn from, and giving myself the green light and the privilege to say, if I heard about it and it was interesting, I'll buy it.
What other resources have been helpful for you? So I'm hearing we've got some newsletters from some people you very, very much respect, who then also, like Knowledge Project has a podcast associated with it. Tim Ferriss has the newsletter, but then also the podcast. So there's things like that. Is there any other resources that you found just incredibly beneficial from a learning standpoint?
Again, I go back to the podcasts, and I don't subscribe to all of them, nor do I pay for all of them necessarily the way you could. There's so many. But again, going back to those personalities, Tim Ferriss, Rich Roll, Malcolm Gladwell, and Revisionist History, Shane Parrish, just being able to consume those on your time, on your schedule. And then again, having ways to remember them. And then I know that doesn't sound necessarily profound, but
No.
it's about serving it back up to me that I find is so important. And so instead of manually writing it in a notebook, if I can do something on the iPhone that I can either easily access, or it serves it back up for a reminder to me to learn and saturate and bring it back to front of mind and share, that's just so key these days. And so I've tried to optimize, who I follow on Twitter and how I curate and collate that information for future use.
When are you consuming the podcasts?
Sometime on walks. So I do like a morning walk with nothing. So I've been walking up late with no music or podcast, just taking in the mornings. So the podcasts for me largely are in the car,
Okay.
or in the evening, or if it's a longer exercise, period, whether it's a run or it's on the bike. If I'm not on the Peloton, I'll do podcasts that way. But mostly the car. I mean, you can yes, the commute is less these days, but there's still one. And if I go to Chicago or I go to Indy, you can clip off quite a bit of a podcast or otherwise just by doing that instead of listening to, Sirius or listening to music. So I pretty well on podcasts in the car.
Yeah, I've really fallen in love with audiobooks.
Yeah.
I would get into bed at night and open up a book and I'd fall asleep pretty readily and just not get through. And so I've had just this really, really kind of wonderful streak and it makes my drive time feel a little more purposeful. It adds some purpose to some of my walks as well, where I'll be listening to an audiobook and just really kind of consuming it and just staying with it. And because at times it would be that I would tell myself the story, at least, of, oh, my mind wanders and I don't hear it. Well, that actually happens when I'm reading too.
Sure. Yeah.
So using some of that time, especially drive time where it used to just be music, that's been so helpful.
Yeah. The other one for me, and it's still there a bit, I mean, maybe it's not as much for people these days, but is flights too. So just, long periods of time where I'm stationary and I have a chance to focus. Using that somewhat productively has been really beneficial.
How often is it that you're consuming something that has nothing to do with marketing, but it hits you as completely relevant? Are you experiencing that?
Yeah, I have a couple of thoughts on that. I think one, I've given myself license to most times read or consume whatever in that moment seems interesting or valuable or additive. So it might be on parenting, it might be on happiness, it might be on our land grant universities in the last 160 years of those nationwide. If it's especially from someone I trust, I've given myself license to say, I'll consume. And I think it's Naval Ravikant who said basically, if you want to instill in your kids a love for reading, get them reading anything they want in the beginning, whatever they want, common books, whatever, because it's going to instill in them. He said, kind of like let them read the junk before they'll read the great stuff. And I've kind of given myself a later in life license to do that. You didn't ask the question this way, but I think it's interesting. And you and I talked about it a little bit. The other one that I've let myself off of the hook on is I think you see a lot of folks at the end of the year who will show their LinkedIn photo of their 40 or their 50 or their 20 or whatever books that they read. And oftentimes that means finishing stuff you don't want to finish, or sticking to a book or sticking to books when there's other things you can consume. So I've kind of given myself also the green light to consume whatever it is, whether it's in Pocket or it's on Twitter or it's The Atlantic or HBR or Wired or Fast Company, even in times when it's in lieu of the 20 books that are sitting to my right at the bed. So just giving myself the green light to be a consumer, to be a learner, and to your point, not always about marketing, but the other things that capture my heart and my mind.
And just modeling that for your children, modeling the fact that you're consuming, that you're curious, that you're interested, modeling that for your team, that you are curious, you're interested, you're learning, you're humble about the fact that we can't know it all. I think just that role modeling is really, really fun. My daughter is 12, Kate, and she started off with these, they're almost like comic book books. There's
Yeah,
a name for them. I'm forgetting the name of it right now. But she started off with these books where we were wondering is are you ever going to move to a book without a bunch of pictures and little
sure.
boxes and caricatures? But all of a sudden she got a passion for those books, and then she got a passion for reading, and now she is crushing 300-page novels in series of 6, 7 books. She started with Harry Potter. That was the first one that really brought her in. And then now she is just voracious. We have to ask her to turn the light off at night.
Well, what a good problem to have.
Yeah, I mean, but
I
modeling that, right? I mean, I just think it's invaluable. I really do. And as a leader, modeling that, it's invaluable.
Well, I love that idea. So with my family, so I've got a 6-year-old son and a 2-year-old daughter, and there's two instances that I'll cite with my son where it's not what you say, it's what you do.
Mm,
And so one, when I go to the basement and I get on the Peloton or I do my future workout or whatever, my son likes to come down now and he likes to get on the rower. And it's
nice.
just amazing to see him model my behavior, model a healthy behavior
Yep.
of coming down and working out while dad does. We'll go upstairs and he'll have something to eat and he'll ask me, Dad, is this healthy? Right.
Yeah.
So it's influencing that. But my other favorite one, and I've got if you ever borrow a book after me, I apologize for this factor, but my son will actually get in bed next to me and he'll see me highlighting and he'll want to do the same. So I'll give him a book and I'll give him a pen and he'll do his own version of highlighting because he wants to be like dad. But again, what an incredible and positive signal he's giving me of, Dad, I'm watching what you're doing
Yeah.
and I want to be like that. I know Seth Godin on Tim Ferriss talked about, he said, if you want to raise fundamentally different children, he said, spend 2 hours with them each night. And he said, I really focus in two areas. I focus on leadership, but he said the bigger one is just helping them solve interesting questions. And so he talks about how he and his kids cook together every night. And I
Wow.
just love that idea of it doesn't have to be profound. It doesn't have to be the museum,
Yep.
but it is come home at 5:15 and be with them till they go to bed.
Yep.
And what is that instilling in the doing, not in just the saying?
Again, modeling for them. I'd mentioned we were just in Alaska. We were there for 10 days,
Yeah, it's awesome.
traveling the state. And there's all kinds of instances where they would look to us and say, well, what should we do? And we look at them and say, we don't know. We haven't been here before. What do you think?
Right. Right.
And
I mean, you
them helping us engaging in that problem solving in the moment, or them having a part of that solution. It's real world, man,
No, you're so right. I love, you taught us many of the Jedi mind tricks of consulting here, but being able to say to my son, well, what do you think? Or what do you think it is? Or where do you think it is? Or how would you go about this?
Yeah.
And just seeing that first moment of response and reaction of, I'm going to have to do the hard work and then have to do it, right? How do you get that cap
Exactly.
off that bottle? Or how do you open that piece of mail? It's just great to build that muscle.
Yep. Ethan, as we wind down for today, would you share some resources that you have caught your eye? I mean, you've mentioned a number, but maybe are there a couple books that you just continue to come back to, or you would want individuals who are consumers of this podcast, which is a podcast all about leadership? What
Yeah.
are a couple resources that you would mention for people to check out? And I'm going to have this is probably going to be the most resource intensive show notes I've ever developed, because I'm going to try and put all of them into the show notes so people have access to the different individuals that you've highlighted, but then also some of these resources you've highlighted.
When I think about books of late, Boyd Vardy's Lion Tracker's Guide to Life really comes to mind. When I think about leadership, I do think about Jim Collins a lot, and the application of not just good to great, but the application of good to great in the social sectors, the flywheel. That's been a huge and wonderful monograph for me, especially as he summarizes basically all of his work in the last 20 minutes of it. And how do you get the momentum going, and how do we get the systems and the thinking there that's so important? So I give it away a lot. In higher ed now, I'm giving away Long Life Learning a lot. I'm giving away Acker's book on marketing and branding, as well as his creating signature stories a lot.
Mm.
And I guess that leads me on the last one. I think no matter what you're in, the transition that we've made in our industry over time, I think it went from marketing to brand to now storytelling. And I don't care what you're in, great stories beat great spreadsheets. And so
Wow.
I think everyone building some muscle in storytelling, and storytelling that allows people to recall it and feel something and take
Yes.
action
Yes.
based on it is powerful, no matter your job, no matter your vocation, no matter where you are in life. And so I think the great storytellers are so worth studying and emulating and learning from and sharing.
I was reminded of that. I started a presentation the other day, and I haven't built this muscle the way I want to. And it was an important presentation with an important organization. But I chose to begin with a story. And again, it hasn't necessarily been my go-to way of starting a presentation. But the reaction I got from that, Ethan, was just so powerful. It was a lot of fun. And it was actually a lot of fun to connect to the story and then show up incredibly authentic for this audience. And it just hit. And so I couldn't agree with you more. And talk about connecting, marketing and branding and to leadership. I mean, great leaders are also great storytellers. They
Yeah.
are helping others envision a future or envision a path or envision an opportunity, even if they don't have all the answers. But here's the opportunity. How do we get there? I love it. I absolutely love it.
I think that one's just so key. In brand, we often talk about whether it's Purdue or it's Honda or Craftsman, right? I can say a word and it saves me from having to say 1,000.
Mm,
And I think the same is true with storytelling when you're like, tell me about that. And so I'll tell you a really quick story. We're associated with a organization here in Indiana called Little Red Door. And for now 50 years, they've been serving the underserved and the underinsured cancer patients of the state. But
okay.
they have a camp, and they have a camp for kids with cancer. And I volunteered at it a couple of years ago. And so somebody says to me, "Hey, I know we're playing golf these next couple of days, and we're raising money for Camp Little Red Door. Can you tell me about the camp?" I could tell them all about it and all the things they offer, and all the people that come, and the camp counselors and the facilities, et cetera. And I always say, let me just tell you a quick story. I was serving as a camp counselor one summer, and we were in charge of with the 5 to 7 year olds of making a video. And so we had them all lined up, and we said to the kids, what kind of video, what kind of story do you want to tell in this video that we're going to shoot? And one kid said, "Hey, I want to tell a story about an astronaut." And we said, "Oh, that's cool." And another kid said, "Well, I really want to tell a story and do a video on dinosaurs." So, "Oh, that's interesting, cool." And then this little girl, 6 years old, bald, big scar across her head, raised her hand. And in a faint voice, she said, "I would really like to make a video about a kid with cancer." We all kind of looked at each other, already teary eyed in that regard, and said, "Ooh, tell us more. Why would you like to make a story about a kid with cancer?" 6 years old, big scar on her head. She said, "I'd like to make this video about a kid with cancer. And then I'd like to show it on the first day of school so I could convince my friends that cancer is not contagious."
Mm, oof.
Oh my God. Right.
Yeah.
So, get your checkbook out and come play golf with me, because we're going to go raise the 150 grand next summer that gets to get her to go have that camp experience and feel normal. When at 6 years old, she's going to kindergarten and seeing her friends, and they think that she might give them her cancer. Right.
Wow.
So I go back to this idea of we are very focused at Purdue now. Yes, in brand, and yes, in the fundamentals and the disciplines of marketing. But there's a reason why we've been so invested in stories.purdue.edu over the last 2 years. And that is of a campus of 50,000, of 600,000 alums, of 153 years of history. What binds us together and what gives us the most emotive experiences are these amazing stories, and everyone has them. And so
Yeah.
I really focus these days on learning, the great stories and how they're comprised, and learning from the great storytellers like Steve Jobs and others. But that's a place I'm really interested in reading a lot.
Love it. Well, sir, I know you have a kindergarten orientation to get to coming up
We
here. Are you
do.
feeling anxious? Are you feeling nervous?
My
How are
son
you?
is, and I keep having to tell him you don't have to be, which is
Our
amazing.
kids. So this is another, we're going to turn this into a parenting podcast, but
Yes.
it's kind of where we are. So it's interesting. In the last, I don't know, 4 or 5 months, I have had a couple quote unquote failures. Maybe a paper wasn't accepted at a journal. Great thing to model for your children.
Mm-hmm.
For this presentation I was mentioning a couple moments ago, I did feel a little bit anxious. And a word we have in our household for one of those times where we're doing something new and we don't totally know how it's going to go is nervous sighted. The kids came up with that word, nervous and excited, and they put them together and they're feeling a little nervous sighted. So even the other night, I felt a little nervous sighted, and I told the kids that, hey, it's normal. It's all good. This is part of how you know you're going somewhere new and developing and trying new things. You're going to feel nervous sighted, and that's normal. And
that's
isn't
awesome.
that cool? Isn't that a cool way that they frame that?
It is. They're so good.
Isn't it?
Yes, I really like that. I think our son he's going to be nervous sighted to go to kindergarten. And I think my wife rightfully is more excited than nervous to ship him off, as she should be. And he'll do great and she'll do great. And we're just really, really happy for him. We're all at a really neat point in our lives.
Well, sir, I'm so thankful for you spending some time with me today. And I know listeners are going to love that conversation. A number of just wonderful resources to tap into. Lifelong learning, and then the phrasing you used from this book. I haven't heard of this book. I'm going to have to check it out.
This book is called Long Life Learning. And I love the first third in particular, because it really does talk about the adult learner. It talks about the learning that we need to do from 22 on.
Yes.
And it talks about disrupting higher education, because after 22, the winners will be those that provide the on and the off ramps for long life learning in a frictionless fashion, the way Google or Coursera or John Carroll or Purdue hopefully will do. It's just a fascinating to think about, at 22 or 42 or 62, what do you need to know? And where are you going to get that, to your point, to stay on the cutting edge and preferably not on the chopping block?
Yes. Okay, sir. Be well. Thank you.
Thanks, Scotty.
Bye-bye. Oof. For those in higher ed, that last statement really, really, really hit me when we were talking about long life learning. Are we as institutions that source of long life learning? Are we that resource for individuals over the course of their life? Again, if someone has been born that will live to 150, how do we as academic institutions stay incredibly relevant in the minds of learners? I think that's an important question. I think it's a critical question. And from a leadership perspective, the practical wisdom for me in this conversation with Ethan is, as a leader, are you modeling that learning is a way of being? And are you modeling that for your team and creating an environment where we have common knowledge and common language? And I think Ethan said, so that there's that compounding benefit that our team can accelerate at an ever increasing rate. Love it. Ethan, congratulations on the success you all are having at Purdue. There are so many links in the show notes, everyone. Please check them out. Those might not be the links for you, but what are your links? What are your resources? How are you systematizing your learning and modeling that for others and creating an environment where that can occur? Take care, everyone. Be well. Have a great day, and we'll see you soon. You have just finished another episode of Practical Wisdom for Leaders with Scott Allen. To contact me, visit scottjallen.net or send me a note at scott@scottjallen.net. I'm also on LinkedIn, so let's connect. If you have feedback, I'd love to hear it. And as always, thank you so much for listening. And now here's my daughter, Emily, with the outro.
You've been listening to Phronesis, Practical Wisdom with Scott Allen.